right, hello everyone. Before we start today, I want to acknowledge with respect the Indigenous peoples and communities whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day and on whose traditional territories our work takes place. My name is Autumn Sipis. I am the project manager for the Canadian Coalition for Green Healthcare, and on behalf of the coalition, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar inside the award-winning hospital Retrofit, How Holy Family Hospital Achieved 75% Carbon Reduction. This event is being delivered as part of the Coalition's Preparing Canada's Healthcare Buildings for Net Zero project, made possible with an investment from the Government of Canada's Low Carbon Economy Implementation Readiness Fund. Throughout the event, please use the chat function for any technical issues you may be experiencing. Use the Q&A function for any questions you have regarding the presentation, and our panelists will be answering questions at the end of the event today. We will also be recording this presentation, and the recording will be sent to all registrants and available on our website and YouTube channel at a later time. And here's just a little reminder of where the Q&A and chat boxes are. And we're going to start today by just doing a couple of introductions before I hand things off. So starting us off today is Alex Hutton. She is a professional engineer and is the low carbon energy advisor supporting our Preparing Canada's Healthcare Buildings for Net Zero project, in particular hosting the low carbon energy networking hub sessions and helping curate webinars such as this one. We also have Jeff Weston joining us today, who is a professional engineer and the inventor of the thermal gradient header. With over 35 years in HVAC innovation, Jeff continues to advance low carbon mechanical systems for complex buildings like hospitals and labs. And then we also have Ben Mills joining us, who is also a professional engineer and the founding principal of Impact Engineering, a firm specializing in integrated building systems. Ben is known for pushing the boundaries of low carbon design across sectors like healthcare, housing, and institutional buildings. And then from Providence Healthcare, we have George Gemmell, who is a project manager, where he has been leading a wide range of projects since 2013. His infrastructure projects have improved safety, efficiency, and environmental performance, including roof and windows. And then also from Providence Healthcare, we have Mark Adams, where he has been leading facilities upgrades since 2018 with a background in both electrical and plumbing. Mark brings practical experience to projects focused on equipment renewal, energy savings, and sustainability. Okay, I'm going to hand things off to Alex now to kick off the webinar today. Thank you everyone for joining us. Take it away, Alex.
Thanks, Autumn, and thanks, Ben, who's sharing these slides where I've sprinkled in just a few slides at the beginning because I'm going to give a bit of a backstory. So the project we're talking about here is this award-winning project at Holy Family Hospital, which actually you can jump to the next slide, Ben. Thank you. Which achieved this award, Best in World from the Global Health Carbon Reduction Awards. And the number's kind of small there, but it's 75.08% carbon reduction. And that was based on the difference in the actual, energy and carbon data between 2021 and 2023. So this is an outstanding achievement. I don't know if everyone on the call can sort of put that in perspective of, not many projects are able to achieve such a significant reduction over a 2-year span. And I want to give a backstory because this sort of result doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen by accident, doesn't happen by coincidence. And so next slide, please. And Autumn, just so you know, I think it's showing just your coalition in terms of speaker view. I don't think it matters, but so healthcare is necessarily risk averse, right? It makes sense. And so we're probably all familiar with this idea of an innovation adoption curve. It takes time for any new innovation to go from, just a few people adopting it to being more broadly adopted. So I want to give a bit of a backstory because the technology that was central to achieving that 75% carbon reduction is a technology that has been evolving for many years. Next slide, please. So I'm going to take you back to 2008. At the time, I was working at Stantec, which is a large consulting firm. I was leading an energy modeling team, and myself, Jeff, and others founder were in a room, and we were discussing this building, which at that time was under design, the Earth Sciences building at University of British Columbia. And Jeff was introducing his innovation. It was then referred to as the Thermonix system, now referred to as a thermal gradient header. And next slide, please, Ben, which, to try and sort of make it fairly simple, traditionally we design buildings with the heating system and a cooling system, and we keep them fairly separate. The heating system is going to have a boiler and so on. Cooling system might have a chiller, cooling towers. And for the last many decades, that's been sort of norm to design those fairly much in isolation. Whereas what Jeff was suggesting back in that meeting in 2008 was that there would be this pipe that would connect those different temperature regimes. And, when you think about it, heating really is it's the same as cooling, just moving that thermal energy in the opposite direction. So they really are, in a way, one and the same. So, I was there scratching my head along with the others in the room going, okay, how is this going to work? Is it really going to achieve savings? Myself and my colleague Martina Sutherland were tasked with trying to simulate or energy model this design. So fast forward, the building did get built. Martina's modeling was apparently very well done, and the actual performance did match closely with what she predicted. Next slide, please, Ben. So now fast forwarding to around 2016, I was then working as an energy manager within the Vancouver health system. I worked for a team called the Energy Environmental Sustainability Team that at the time was a consolidated team and still is in various ways, serving Fraser Health, Provincial Health Services Authority, Vancouver Coastal Health, and Providence Healthcare. And my portfolio was Providence Healthcare and PHSA. Back then in 2016, I had just come back from a mat leave, and I reconnected with Jeff, and I heard about several projects that were now up and running. I think several at UBC by that point, one at Langara College in Vancouver, and one at like a community center in BC. And so yeah, I could see that these projects had achieved real results. They were retrofit projects, or some of them were retrofit, and the results were very impressive. So what I knew in theory to be true and possible in terms of the significant energy and carbon savings possible in healthcare, in particular, was showing to be possible through Jeff's invention. So I was looking for an opportunity to see if this innovation could help us in healthcare to achieve better results. So at St. Paul's Hospital, which was, I think, then in 2017, a chiller failed, and I asked the then facility director, Chris Poole, if we could look at, instead of just replacing that chiller like for like, with the same technology, which is often done, I asked, could we have a look and see if there's a way to replace it in a way that could also achieve energy and carbon savings, such as recovering some of that waste heat by installing a heat recovery chiller and designing it to intentionally be able to recover the waste heat that always happens when you deliver cooling. So Chris was happy to allow that to happen. Bernie Nelson, one of the great engineers that I've worked with, he happened to already be working on a project on site. He was extremely familiar with the mechanical systems. So he was able to quickly jump on this opportunity to look at how could we replace this chiller with something better. And he collaborated with Jeff, and they came up with an approach that we then sought funding for and implemented. And it was very successful. It was a very simple installation of a thermal gradient header. We went on to do measurement verification and confirmed its performance, that it met and actually exceeded what the promised savings were. This was building my confidence that this innovation really was something that could add a lot of value for healthcare. Next slide, please. So fast forwarding now to 2019, when Tony Munster joined Providence Healthcare. and he went around and toured his sites. This one, Brock Farney, was one of those. And this was one of the sites where he observed that unfortunately in these very, with climate change and with warmer temperatures in Vancouver, this older building that previously, was built in a time when we didn't need mechanical cooling, he was observing that residents were uncomfortable in the new peak summer temperatures. So he made a firm commitment to find the way to secure the funding to implement mechanical cooling at this facility and others. And so hearing that, I asked him if we could have a look at, if we're going to add cooling, can we look at doing it in a way that also saves energy and carbon? And he was, very happy to look at that because he's very passionate about helping to reduce carbon. So we had to move quickly because the building, the goal was to have cooling in place by the following summer. So it was actually Ben, Jeff, myself, the facility operator, a bunch of us, just started quickly looking at what was possible in this facility. I won't draw it out too much, but basically that ended up being a very successful project, achieving, I think, well over 75% energy and carbon savings. And it actually won Best in Canada award for the same award that Holy Family then won. So I think that's the end of my slides. This was basically a backstory to show that this innovation didn't happen overnight. It took, decades really in the making. And a lot of people contributed to all the projects prior, as well as the one at Holy Family Hospital that Ben is going to take you into more detail on. And one thing I just wanted to be really clear about is the award is based on this snapshot in time of 2001 to 2023. And that's when Ben will go into more detail, but that's when the primary changes were installing the thermal gradient header and the chiller to enable more waste heat recovery. And then windows and PV came later. So those are achieving yet more savings beyond what the award achieved. And Mark and George will tell you more about those later. So I will pass off to Ben.
Thanks very much, Alex. That's a very good overview of this history of where we've been, where the technology came from, and where it's going. Probably a good idea. I don't mind passing over to Jeff if you wanted to add on anything in terms of the history. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Ben. Hello, everybody. Yeah, a long history of what we've been trying to do, and the only reason I was afforded the ability to do it is we were a design build mechanical contractor, so that was very important in that we were offering this innovation as a cost savings on all the original jobs. So the pressure or the impetus for us designing it wasn't really to save carbon and save energy. It was to save capital cost, but not do it in a way that would have a poorer performance. And in the end, we kept tuning it, and we realized that this is a great opportunity not only to save carbon, save energy, and it's really about approaching thermal energy as a resource, which is different than we learned as I learned HVAC, when thermal energy was the problem. So a lot of collaboration has to occur in order to get a thermal gradient header to be installed. You need engineers, you need owners, you need operators, because it doesn't just sort of start up and work right away. They're close to that now, but there's definitely a tuning stage where my team, Darcy and Daniel, will spend time just making sure the building is doing exactly what it can do. So I'll pass it over to Ben now to talk about Holy Family Hospital. We've done quite a few of them with impact at this point, so our collaboration is getting easier and easier. So on to you, Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I should stress that Jeff is probably different than other contractors you work with in that he's very collaborative and he's thinking about the project from the start. So becomes an extension of the design team, which is quite helpful, especially when you've got a novel technology. And they do stick with it to make it work. So I'm going to go through a few items, background, just to give you context, and then we can talk a little bit about how do you make an ambitious project like this happen to the point where it can win a global award. And then a little bit about the TGH technology and some of the strategies we used in specific at Holy Family Hospital. but this will just be skimming the surface. We've done full technical presentations on these type of projects. So if there are questions, perhaps we can address those during the Q&A or in future sessions. So just a bit of an intro here. One of the critical items, and I always come back to this when people ask me, how did we get to this place and how did we make such a substantial reduction? You need somebody who is relentless in setting a vision and making sure the team stays on task. So Tony Munster was that person, executive director at Providence Healthcare. He's been very ambitious with the goals he's setting for Providence Health, and he holds you to account for them. So as an engineer, contractors, and the rest of the team, we like having ambitious goals and we like being held to them. So it really starts from the very, very top. You have to have an owner who's motivated and willing to go after something substantial. So hats off always to Tony for his work and his vision on the project. In terms of those folks who are not from British Columbia, this is just a snapshot of the province and the different health authorities that we've got across the province. Impact's done work with basically all of them, but we're down in the Vancouver area with Holy Family Hospital and Providence Healthcare. So down in this kind of red blob down there. This is just a little bit about Providence Health to give you an idea. If you're working for a health authority, roughly the size and scale of it compared to yours. And then this is their portfolio across the Vancouver region, essentially. So just like Jeff said, we've worked on a lot of these buildings, but for this presentation, we're talking about Holy Family Hospital, which is in South Vancouver here, kind of close over to getting close to the Fraser River. That's a little image of Holy Family Hospital and just a bit of a background. It's a couple of buildings. There's a north building and there's another kind of south or main building. It's been constructed over the years, like a lot of facilities have been, but started quite a long time ago. You can see kind of the scale of the project, 120,000 square feet. It does do some kind of acute care there, a lot of beds as well. Yeah, and a lot of outpatient work also. So it's a kind of an outpatient type of hospital. It's not a major surgical type hospital. You've got some more intensive ones in the Providence portfolio, but still nonetheless a significant healthcare institution. And so you have to be mindful of all the healthcare realities, certainly patient care, and all the staff working there as well. So some images just to give an idea of the existing systems that we found on site when we were there with the facilities team and with Jeff and everyone else. So pretty standard. I'm sure anybody who's worked in a healthcare facility has probably seen a lot of these larger Cleaver Brooks boilers. So we had a couple of those in place on the left image. On the right image, you can see a heat exchanger and a domestic hot water tank. So that was the domestic hot water storage tank. Everything was being fed in the original design by those two Cleaver Brooks boilers. So pretty standard. One thing I'll say is that very forward-thinking engineers of the past gave us a really nice big mechanical room to work with. So on the flip side of that boiler image that you see there, if we were to turn around 180 degrees, there was a big open floor area and they had designated it for future cooling or future chillers. So that was extremely smart move by those folks. So maybe a good lesson for all engineers to try to defend some space for the future, because sometimes we tend to just do everything down to the last inch to try to save space. But fortunately, these previous folks had saved us space, which gave us lots to play with. Some other existing images, rooftop units connected back to the main boiler system again. So we have a couple of internal air handlers. We have a couple, well, more than a couple of rooftop units. Most of them all connected to the hydronic system, so heated by the boilers. The center image is an old kind of heat pump heat recovery system, which was a good idea, but hadn't been working for some time and really wasn't giving them the cooling they were looking for. So the idea there was providing cooling to a couple of the air handlers with this system. But again, that componentry needed to be removed. So opportunities there where we can provide some cooling where it's been lacking, plus do some heat recovery, do something with that heat, and generally try to do better with the thermal energy in the building. And we'll talk more about that as we go forward. Natural gas. So we were very, very focused, as you saw probably from the first slide. Tony had set an internal goal of an 80% reduction in carbon, which is very tricky to achieve. But as you could see from the award, we got pretty darn close and eventually got there. But before we started into the project, this is what we were facing. So natural gas being used for primarily ventilation. You can see almost 40% there, 30% domestic hot water, more or less, and then perimeter radiant heating, almost a quarter, and then some smaller end uses. So ventilation in healthcare facilities, always a big opportunity, tend to have high outdoor air ventilation rates. And if you don't have proper heat recovery or just minor heat recovery there, that's always a very big opportunity. Plus gives you a great heat source and sink to work with when you're doing your design. So we'll return to that as well, but that's the snapshot of where natural gas was being used in the facility when we got there. And some data in terms of energy use for 2017 through 2019. This is what we were personally using as our baseline when we were starting to plan the project. You can see from this, I would just say take away that the natural gas is the darker bar, darker color. Electricity is the orange color. You can see natural gas is about 70% of the total energy use in the facility. So heavily dominated by heating, by natural gas for domestic and other purposes. And that's pretty standard in most facilities. In a colder climate, you might see this, I would assume, a little bit worse than 70%. So we're pretty mild in Vancouver area, obviously. And you can see the EUI for the facility. So energy use intensity, that's all that energy divided by the area for 2019. So 380 kilowatt hours. And then this is just gets even more extreme when you look at where the carbon emissions are coming from. So in BC, our electricity grid at the time of these measurements anyways, was quite clean. A lot of sources from hydro primarily. So we've got quite a clean grid electricity wise. Natural gas is producing most of the carbon emissions on the project. So now we're talking about 95% of the carbon coming from natural gas. So at that point, it becomes very obvious where you need to focus. This might be completely different in your context if you're in Alberta or Ontario or somewhere else. You'd have to look at the mix and maybe tailor some of the solutions a little bit differently than what we've done or build on the ones that we've done. So that's a background on the project and the building. In terms of how you do this, so this is a bit of a process-oriented section here, just for a couple of slides. But really, I think this is where the magic is. The technical details will fall, I think, if you have the right team and the right minds working on it. But the planning of the project and the vision is really the critical piece to making sure you're going to achieve success. So you can see at the very start, back in 2020, Impact did an energy study with Thermonex involved. So we were already looking at conceptual ideas, trying to figure out solutions. And we were costing, calculating energy savings and figuring out what was the right mix, what were the best opportunities. So that mix of having kind of contractor, design build, engineer team, facilities team, all looking at it at the very start, produced a pretty robust roadmap for us to work from. From there, because it's a healthcare facility especially, and because we were tackling a lot of work, you have to be able to think through a phasing plan for the work. Pretty critical if you're replacing major equipment and you can't have much downtime. So it's an active working hospital. We can't really have too much interruption. Therefore, we phased the project into 3 phases. So that needed some thinking there too. And we required some patience, additional drawing sets and coordination and so on to figure out how these things mesh together. You can see a little description below each phase in terms of what we did in each phase. We could talk maybe in the Q&A if you have questions on why we did it the way we did it. But just to know that phasing is important to think through and downtime. And then after that orange period, the orange period kind of covers where we achieved the major savings and submitted for the award. And as Alex mentioned, afterwards, we continued working on the facility and our PHC project managers will talk about those retrofits, but we've got windows, solar PV and some more window work that happened afterwards as well. And the work continues there, to be honest. There's a lot of other projects that we'll be chipping away at over the next few years. So those are the key teams. We've already touched on them, but we had Impact doing a lot of the heavy lifting from the engineering side, primarily mechanical and energy. Really heavy engagement from Providence Healthcare, from their facilities team. They were excellent to work with, and then leadership. And also, of course, Jeff and his team at Thermonex. So bringing those players together, I wanted to have a specific slide to this to know that this is an actual team that you have to assemble and keep together throughout that entirety of the project from 2020 and beyond. So we're talking about maybe a 5-year kind of commitment for these folks to be together and to make this a success. It's just a snapshot of some of the Impact team. You can see myself. These individuals were all involved, but they're all they're all very smart people. Kenny on the energy side, really well known in the province for pretty innovative work on that side. And Jason's probably one of the better healthcare engineers in the province as well. So we had some really sharp minds on the engineering side on the project. In terms of the last maybe thing I'd say on approach, you can read through these different bubbles. There's a lot of things that happen as you're trying to plan a project. But I would say on the left-hand side, the vision that came from Tony, having a lot of discussions within the team. And then I'd say most critically is an extremely flexible mindset across all the players. So as an engineer, it's can be difficult to work with contractors and receive their feedback and realize they may have a better idea or a different idea than you do, and vice versa. But I'd say in this case, all the players were quite flexible in the way they approach things, and they all knew that the end goal was the 80% that Tony wanted. So it didn't matter how we got there. It was just whatever idea was the best and how it would fit together the best. So a lot of ideas came and went, got massaged from the start and right through construction and design. So you got to remain extremely flexible and focus on the goal at the end and not necessarily your piece of it and try to hang on to it. So that was all players were doing that, but I would say that's extremely critical to achieve a really high bar. This is just a slide to show and I'm sure it's hard to read. The different colors represent different years, and then there's some vertical text here, basically showing different parts of the phasing. So you can see when different things happened. The folks at Thermonex used this so they could track what the effect was of each major action. So commissioning things, adding in new equipment, and so on. You can see, I would just point to one thing. It's 2022 is when we started to achieve some savings. So you can start to see the green bars declining over time pretty substantially over 2022. And interestingly, just previous to that in 2021, you can see a giant blue bar spike too. So when you're tuning these systems, you can actually go backwards at times as you're maybe removing things, relying on things more heavily than you normally would, changing sequencing and programming, etc. So you can overshoot. That's something that can definitely happen. So you can be aware of that. You can note this, you can have a little panic, and you can figure out why, and then you can move forward and then do additional tuning. So expected as we're trying to remove things and add new components and then tuning them over the years. This is probably a much better slide to show you the substantial reduction that was achieved. So somewhere around the 10,000 gigajoule mark as we started the project, more or less on average. And you can see by the time that the award period was over, we're around the 2,000 gigajoule mark here in orange. So roughly that 75% reduction that Alex mentioned. And then over time, as we've tuned and figured things out, now practically a 90% reduction on the natural gas side. So carbon side, obviously electricity has some part to play there. So as the electricity comes up, you can see on this right-hand box now, we've essentially flipped the scenario. We're now down to about 10% of the energy use intensity coming from gas, and about 90% coming from electricity. That's through the use of electrical equipment, which we'll talk about. But electricity does have a portion of natural gas. So even though we've got like a 90% reduction, let's call it in gas, we get to maybe a 75-80% reduction in carbon within our BC grid. So yeah, substantial. I love this graph. This looks like quite dramatic. Just imagine if you're able to achieve that at your facility. So just quickly on a couple of the strategies and introduce you to the thermal gradient header. Again, in the Q&A, we can get more in depth here. I think the key concept to take on board, and this is really simple because it's just like a house image, but I think this is the easiest way to think about it. Thermal energy is a resource. So in the past, we would basically bring in outdoor air or other factors, provide heating or cooling to it, and then dump it back outside of the building. You've got a whole bunch of thermal resource there that's getting to you either via the sun or conduction that's getting into your building, and all of the internal gains that are within your building as well. Plus you've got air streams that are coming and going from the building, which are also resources that you can use. So looking at the building more holistically as an energy fabric, you've got all of these resources you can take advantage of. So if you draw a simple image of your building before you even start the project, figure what's going in and what's going out, you'll start to realize that there's a lot of energy you can play with and resources that you can take advantage of. So anything that's leaving, coming, going, you can decide if you want it to come or to go, essentially, and reuse that energy within the building and upgrade it as well for uses you might want, like producing domestic hot water or heating. Even if it's a lower grade type of energy, it can be upgraded for use in the building. So yeah, I think that's the main concept I would say to take on first at the early stage. Look at what energy streams are involved and what you can make use of. And then on the thermal gradient header, it basically is a flexible platform. It allows you to make use of that energy, the thermal energy, as it comes and goes within the building, and then to tie it to the right load within your building, or the right source that you want to connect it to. So you're just going to use it as a way to connect to all of this different energy movement that's in the building, and then redirect it. It's also very compact, so that's another really big feature of it, which you'll get from the next slide here. It looks complex on the right, but that's just because there's showing all the valve connections and so on. But if you just focus on the kind of color coding, one of the major innovations is that it's a single pipe, and it connects everything from your hottest heating source, so like a boiler, let's say, traditional boiler making really hot water at the top in red, and then your chillers making really cold chilled water in the blue in the bottom. So all of that stuff is connected together. And then what we're doing there is we're just making connections that involve some valving and some pumps. And we're trying to connect that to loads and sources within the building. So again, thinking about that thermal resource in the building and making connections so that we can either pick up energy or dump energy to locations that we want to. So each of those would be connected to loads within your building. So ventilation, domestic hot water, space heating, all of your cooling requirements. Your condenser sections are all connected in here too, so we can use those and upgrade those. So all of that movement that would happen in a hydronic system basically flows through this. And then Jeff and his team of very smart and capable people are coding and programming this so that we can make the right connections, connect the right temperature resources. So if you need a lower temperature, you can connect that to a lower temperature portion of the pipe, higher temperature to higher temperatures. And they're trying to maintain a bit of a flow balance as well within that pipe. And Jeff can talk more in detail if you have questions on how they balance, what's important about the decouplers. So trying to get basically a zero flow with those decouplers. But again, it's just making connections to the right resources within the building in a single pipe. What's great about that is that this eliminates a lot of things that you would normally have in a system like this, which primarily take up space, like tanks. Usually if you're doing heat recovery, anybody who's been involved in those projects, you would see a ton of tanks for storage and buffering of the system. With this system, we don't require the tanks. So that's a big cost savings and also a big space savings, because space becomes at a big premium when you're trying to retrofit something in. The other thing is that we used changeover coils in many of the air handlers where we added cooling. So that cooling coil switches over to become a preheat coil, or maybe it can do all the heating depending on the time of the year in those air handlers. So again, that saves space, reuses resources. So there's many examples of this throughout the project in the building where we've utilized existing systems or added something that does dual duty. So again, a lot of space savings and cost savings, as Jeff mentioned at the outset. Just a quick bullet point on what was actually done there. So you can see one of the chillers. It's a heat recovery chiller by Trane. We've got two of them in there. We've obviously got the thermal gradient header. We added two electric boilers to help us with peaking and with domestic hot water final heat. We've got 4 condensing boilers. You can kind of see them in the background there. We've got exhaust heat recovery air handlers. So they were previous ones there. We've just added new ones that suited the project with proper hydronic heat recovery coils. We talked about switchover coils, and then there's a lot of controls work to tune and make this all work together. But not a lot of like revolutionary technology. This is all stuff that you would have installed in most healthcare facilities. So it's installing it in the right sequence, connecting it up with the TGH, and then fine tuning it all of it from the control side. And that's all for my portion. So I'm going to pass it along here, I think to the PhD folks to talk about the Windows portion.
Thanks, Ben. George, can you try speaking? Make sure we can hear you.
Yes,
Okay, perfect. We
I
can.
am here. Excellent, thank
Great.
you. And everyone can see my slides okay? Not in presentation mode?
It just popped back to the other mode again.
Oh, okay, that's better.
No, okay, there we go. There we go. Perfect.
Perfect, thank you. Hello, everybody. I am George Gemmell. I am a project manager with Providence Healthcare. I worked on the window replacement project on the north building of Holy Family Hospital. And you can see here that it is in the highlighted area on the image below. This is the 48 windows that were replaced at Holy Family Hospital on the third floor of the extended care area. This happened from January 15th, 2024 through to March 14th, 2024. Purpose and objectives, obviously to replace the original 1954 single pane windows from the original build of the building and install Silex 2100 series triple glazed windows. Objective, obviously the main objective for Providence Healthcare is to improve resident and patient comfort and safety. That also extends to visitors and staff members as well. Enhance the safety with modern window systems and increase energy efficiency. So better insulation, reduce drafts, and also reduce sound, because you can imagine the amount of noise that was coming through single pane windows. So the original 1954 single pane windows were well beyond their intended lifespan, with deteriorating seals, frames, and glass integrity, no longer meeting current building or safety standards. Energy efficiency and cost, so poor insulation leading to significant heat loss and gain. The spaces were very drafty, constant complaints, increased reliance on HVAC systems, so higher energy bills, and not aligned with modern energy efficiency targets. And then resident patient comfort and environment. So noticeable drafts, temperature fluctuations, and external noise. Decreased indoor air quality and inconsistent room temperatures. And this is what the windows looked like before. So you could see single pane with the old metal frames. And then also one of the bigger windows. And after, so there was the high modern performance design. So triple pane glass with argon gas fill for maximum insulation. High efficiency, low E coating reduces the heat transfer. Durable frames with improved seals and materials. Energy efficiency and cost savings, dramatically reduces heat loss in winter and heat gain in the summer. Reduces demand on HVAC system. Reducing costs, support sustainability goals and long-term operational efficiency, and then enhanced comfort and care environment, improve thermal regulation, consistent room temperatures, sound dampening reduces external noise, creating a quieter healing space, and supports patient rest, staff focus, and overall well-being. And then the final product from the outside, and then also from the inside with a nice cleaner white finish, and it just aesthetically looks a lot better from the exterior of the building. So project delivery, I was the project manager on this project in partnership with Beamstra Architecture and the Silex fiberglass window installation team. So for this project, as we were dealing with extended care residents, we had to be very careful with maintaining kind of a steady consistency with some of those patients because they're not doing well with change and things like that. So we had temporary rooms set up where we could decant residents into the overflow room while we changed the windows in their bedroom. So they were typically out of that room for 3 to 4 days. Reason for that is there was quite a bit of abatement required for removing the windows. We had to remove the frames as well as a portion of the drywall to be able to install the new windows. So that had asbestos and lead paint identified in the original window assembly and plaster walls. So there was hoarding, anti-rooms for containment, negative pressure machines, and HEPA air scrubbers for air quality control. Certified team completed the safe demolition, and then Silex's team went in to install the new high efficiency windows. And then there were trim pieces put all the way around, and all hazards were mitigated. And you can also see here additional exterior windows. So impacts and outcomes, improved comfort, so reduced drafts, temperature fluctuations, spaces remain noticeably warmer in the winter months. And we actually received quite a few complaints at the start of this year's or last year's heating season because the spaces were very, very hot, which is great news. We got to reduce all of the heat and have a more efficient, comfortable space. So aesthetic enhancements, obviously from the exterior, the windows do look a lot better with the white trim and just a better visual appeal from the street. HVAC performance and efficiency, so enhanced insulation led to reduced heating demand. Post-installation heating saw multiple reports of too hot. Families and staff shared appreciation for improved comfort and overall appearance, and residents benefit from a quieter, more thermally stable space. So in closing, just to let you know, we are about halfway through the second phase of this project. We're almost done all of the second floor windows for the rehab unit at Holy Family Hospital. And then we will be moving on to complete the rest of the extended care windows. And that's a total of 196 windows for the second phase that is currently ongoing. So this is just an ongoing commitment to enhancing patient-centered spaces, and it supports the broader GHG reduction goals across Providence Healthcare, and then just continued focus on comfort, safety, and sustainability in all of our facilities. And that is it.
Thanks, George. Over to you, Mark.
Sorry, I was muted. Is that showing up correctly?
Switch the top display setting there to the other one, and then it'll be perfect.
See that? How's that?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. My name is Mark Adams. I'm also a project manager with Providence Health. I'm just here to talk to you about the solar array that we installed on Holy Family. I've got some contextual information, which Ben's already covered, just describing some things about the site. So the the system itself that we installed on the roof, starting there, we put in 370 panels at 545 watts each, giving us approximately 200, well, just over 200 kilowatts of DC collection ability. The roof of the facility was also recently done over the last year, so we were able to add new pedestals that are compatible with the membrane that was put on. They're a polymer pedestal that's essentially adhered to the roof membrane, which has a kinetic rail system that's attached to it. The kinetic rail allows the panels to have the proper tilt and have support for snow and wind loads. And also it makes it easier for the installation to go faster. Everything lines up a bit better for the installers. Sorry. The inverters themselves are made by SolarEdge. We have 3 sets of 50 kilowatt, 3-phase AC converters. These go into a 600 amp combiner panel that is fed down into our switchgear. The inverters themselves, they sample the incoming power from the grid and adjust the phase and voltage to adapt to that. So everything operates at 120 208 volt power. So there's no transformer required. It just helped reduce a step in the chain. And with our part of the design was they engineered the output to be based on Vancouver's latitude and our climate here. We have a cloud a good portion of the year, but the output was engineered to be 211 megawatt hours per year. So the results that we've had have been pretty positive so far. We have web-based monitoring that shows real-time status of the system, and we can track historical data. We can also do any kind of diagnostics on the web to address any deficiencies. If there's any problems with a panel, any kind of shading or anything like that that we need to take care of, we can address that pretty fast. So the system went online in mid-March, and since then, the total to date, we produced 93.67 megawatt hours, which is 20% of our building usage. And to get more specific, the week ending June 10th, we produced 8 megawatt hours. It was a fairly sunny week, which is kind of nice on this type of system, obviously. And we produced 28% of our building electrical use from our own site, which is great. We're going to get some synergies in the future with because we've had some increased work going on to help with cooling in the building that we can offset any additional demand we can offset with power that we produce on site. And that's pretty much all I have for the solar panel installation. We do have we took some drone video of the before and after, which I unfortunately can't stream on here, or else my computer will be a bit too laggy. But you can review this in the recording, and if you would like to take a look at the YouTube videos, we have them on YouTube, and you can take a look. They're just a 30-second clip before and after, and it shows location of some of the equipment. The inverters are in that location, approximately there. So you can see that on the screen. And yeah, it's just good to review. It's nice that we can provide some of our own power on site, and we intend to do more of these projects in the future. We have another site that we have two smaller arrays set up, and they've been working for the last 3 years, producing power at Mount St. Joseph's Hospital in Vancouver. And as I mentioned, we intend on continuing doing installations like this at other sites in our portfolio. And yeah, that's it for me.
Thanks, Mark. All right, this is pretty much now where we segue to the Q&A. So we can probably just stop sharing, and I see there was already one question from Peter. Thank you. I'll read it aloud. It says, given a public tendering process, how was the mechanical electrical contractor brought in to help the design, a design assist contract, and how was competitive bidding achieved? So I know that this is definitely always a topic, and I remember many conversations along the way in different projects where this was an issue. I don't want to misspeak, so I wonder if, Ben, if you know, and I guess also wondering if the question is regarding Holy Family, assuming it is. Ben, do you have any comments on that? And if not, we can always follow up offline.
Yeah, for sure. I think honestly, Jeff would be the best one to answer because he was contracted directly to PHC, but he was certainly brought in under a separate contract to provide that direct advice. But Jeff, you take it away.
Well, it really started with the study. So we did some early work on what the schematic design potential would look like in the end. And then Kenny did the model and came up with that it was really going to be, have a significant achievement of energy savings. And at that point, it was selected as the choice for the design proceeding forward. At that point, basically the engineer, Ben, you had to recommend that they proceed with the thermal gradient header and that it was okay to sole source it because it's a patented technology, but it was the best solution. So because it's the best solution, they were allowed to sole source.
Yeah, agreed.
Great. So assuming that answers that question, I'm going to read another one here from Linda. Thanks for this terrific presentation. How are you funding these new projects, i.e. PV and Windows? So I'll give a bit of an answer to that, and then I'll ask others to add in. So in terms of funding, back when I was involved in a bit of that backstory, one of the things that was really a game changer was when Tony came on board. He was willing to share with me his capital allocations that were approved. And so just skimming his list, it was really easy to just identify, oh, there's a boiler replacement targeted for this site with, X hundreds of thousands or, millions of dollars. There's an obvious synergy there with reducing energy and carbon. So, there's a domestic hot water allocation allotted for this. So part of the funding in terms of getting things going was just synergizing with already approved capital expenditures for buildings that are aging and have, equipment that really desperately needs to be replaced. And then through the energy studies and leveraging Fortis and BC Hydro's incentive programs, then we were able to bring very significant incentives back into those projects, which then, sort of creates some momentum and helps things continue to move forward from there. So that's part of the sort of how did things get funded. But I don't know if anyone else wants to build upon that. And, Mark and George are probably better suited to talk about the Windows and PV parts.
Yeah, so the Windows, from my understanding, and the solar, Mark, if you don't mind me just stepping in, was mostly capital and then also incentives. So capital funding and then the incentives that we received back from the rebates.
Yeah, BC Hydro was a big part, obviously, of the solar work that we did. We worked with Feenstra Architecture and Ohm Engineering, and TerraTech did the installation. And the group had done a couple of projects before, so we had a good relationship with BC Hydro, and so all the application process and everything was not something new, and we did get some incentive from that project for sure.
Great. Another question from Mo. With regard to the electrical installation, there was no design support, so the PV system was tendered to the PV contractors. Okay, so I think that's Mo helping to answer the question around how it was procured. All right, I'm going to go back to the Q&A box. We've got some more questions there, and I'll encourage folks to add your questions into the Q&A so that we don't have the chat and the Q&A to monitor. Okay, so from David, a mechanical question. What were the original supply return temperatures for the heating system? Did you reduce the temperature when the condensing boiler was installed? So I'll pass that part to Ben.
Yeah, great question. And I'll just add into that Mo and his team at Ohm were the electrical engineers on the Holy Family project as well. So they did the PV, but they also did the main project with us. On the mechanical question, yeah, standard temperatures from any kind of old atmospheric boiler project. So 180 Fahrenheit, 170 Fahrenheit temperatures at the start. And yes, we did reduce the temperatures over time. What we've been finding in a lot of these facilities is that you can actually supply them lower hot water temperatures, even to existing like perimeter radiation, for example. Maybe due to a little bit of oversizing in those perimeter radiators, maybe due to some internal heat gains. But we found we can get that temperature, I think, Jeff, down to around 140, a little bit below that as a peak temperature. So you're getting a lot lower, like into the condensing boiler range and to a heat recovery chiller range for majority of the year.
Yeah, the control logic basically looks at whether we're satisfying the load, and if we're satisfying the load, we drop the temperature. It's a trim and respond type logic, and we've yet to find a project in the Vancouver area where we needed water hotter, fluid hotter than 140 Fahrenheit. That's at the peak of winter, so it's the temperature is much lower the majority of the year.
Yeah, and peak winter for context here for us is like -10 Celsius in Vancouver.
Great. All right. Another question here from Brennan. Are you able to provide any insight on anticipated payback for the 3 projects? And when you say 3 projects, I'm guessing you mean the sort of HVAC, the windows and the PV separately. So I'll pass to Ben and then George and Mark to see if they can each answer that. And I'll just add briefly that one of those backstory projects that was mentioned at St. Paul's Hospital, Chiller 2, that had a calculated payback of less than 3 years when we took into account the base cost to replace with a like-for-like chiller and then the incentive received.
Yeah,
So-
that's right, Alex. It's that is always a tricky question because it all comes down to what you include in your base cost. But as you can see from the photos, we had, equipment that was basically end of life across the board. And you've also got a requirement for cooling. So you've got a place that didn't have cooling. So you'd have to put in some type of cooling system anyways. So by the time you add up all of those base costs of the existing equipment needing replacement, the addition of cooling that you would need anyways, plus avoiding a lot of other additional buffer tanks and all that stuff with a smarter strategy like a TGH strategy, you're looking at a payback, depending how you slice it, probably in the 5-year range for this project, plus or minus. It just really depends on how you choose your base cost. But all that to say that it's not, depending on if you're replacing a lot of equipment, it's not a significant premium over replacing that equipment.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Ben, that the goal is to hit your target at the lowest capital cost. So that's always the goal. So it's not a matter of what's the payback relative to not having that goal. It's, how inexpensively can you meet your goal?
Yeah, correct. Exactly.
Anything anyone else wants to add on payback?
Yeah, on the solar side, I figured the cost was approximately $3,000 per kilowatt DC. So it depends on obviously what your energy cost is where you are. But the payback is definitely not 3 years, but it's a longer term production, and we don't have any costs for producing that amount of electricity for the life of it, which is going to be in the neighborhood of 20-25 years. So it is a bit of a longer look forward, but yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Anything on the windows, George? I know it's probably not an easy calculation there either.
Yeah, sorry. No, I wouldn't have any details of any savings on it, but just the sheer amount of heating reduction, the amount they had to reduce the heat in the heating season was quite substantial. So I can see it being a quick turnaround with the windows.
Yeah, just to add to that, George, because we were tuning the system the whole time and we were struggling to keep that north area of the building warm with 140 Fahrenheit water. We tried, but we found we had to bump it up at times. But now with the new windows, it easily handles the load with the chiller, and we don't need to fire the boiler for that.
And of course, the occupant comfort is that's improved is priceless. Can't put a price tag on it.
Absolutely.
So we're approaching end of time here. I know many of you will have a hard stop, and so just know that this is recorded, and there are more questions here that we haven't yet been able to answer. We can either stay on for a little bit, or I could try sending sort of responses to those after the fact. And also, those of you who are part of our low carbon energy networking hub, we're going to have an opportunity to delve deeper into this project in our next session, which is June 26th, I believe. So thank you, everyone. And I'm going to stay on so I don't lose these questions, but everyone else, I think, is welcome to drop off, unless Autumn, you have any other closing words?
I do, yeah. So thank you everyone for joining today. I would like to request that those of you who have joined fill out our really quick 2-minute webinar exit survey. It would be a huge help. It's one of the only ways, we can collect some metrics for our project. So I just put the link in the chat, and I will be sending it via email with the webinar recording as well. But yeah, I would greatly appreciate anyone who takes the time to fill that out. And yeah, if you guys are able to stay on a little longer and answer some of these questions, that's fantastic. I can also stick around.
Okay, great. I'll continue reading these questions, and those who are able to stay, we can capture the answers as best we can, and then they'll be available in the recording. So there's a question here from Rima, and it's for the Providence team. Do you only focus on cooling, heating, windows, etc. for carbon footprint and sustainability? Are you open to discuss other opportunities to reduce your carbon footprint? Who would be the best point of contact? The short answer there is that Providence is doing a huge amount of work across the board on all aspects of carbon footprint and sustainability quite broadly, in collaboration with the team I mentioned earlier that I used to be a part of. So there's tons going on there. I'm not really sure, Rima, like whether you're a consultant or someone else in the health system wanting to learn from what they're doing, but feel free to reach out to me and I can try and see who's the best person to put you in contact with, depending on exactly what you're looking for. Question from Karen: were you able to reuse the existing piping throughout the facility, or did you need to replace most? I'm guessing Jeff or Ben.
Yeah, I guess we reused primarily most of the piping in the facility. There was some new piping that was run for specific circuits from the TGH over to certain air handlers and so on. But vast majority of the piping was reused. Jeff, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, the major piping work was done within the mechanical room. The only time we really left the mechanical room with piping work was to make the connection to the exhaust coils that are used for both collection and rejection. So they're critical to the operation. So, and I just want to point out that I don't think we said this, but the reason we connect heating and cooling together is because if you actively drop your heating temperature and raise your cooling temperature during the preheat winter season, those temperatures overlap. So there's no reason to have a separate heating and cooling system if they literally function at the same temperature.
Great. Another question. Vancouver doesn't have many sunny days. Isn't the rainy winter season ineffective for solar energy? How many years does it take to recover the investment in solar panels to the money saved? And that was from Amabel. I know, Mark, you answered some of that already, and I think
Yeah, Vancouver definitely is not an ideal location for like the design of the system and the payback that I said that was around in the 20-year mark. That is basically because we have such cloudy winters. If you had it, we did factor that in. We knew ahead what our the potential sunlight that we're going to get. So that's the 211 megawatt hours is based on that. But yes, it would be nice if it was more like Las Vegas. We'd have a lot quicker payback on it for sure.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that it's difficult to put a value on both the reduced pressure on the broader electricity grid, which over time BC Hydro will start to change the rate structures to value that because their grid is becoming increasingly constrained, plus putting a value on having some power on site, if in some sort of emergency it was really needed. So thanks for that question. All right, next one from Andrew. Was there a cost analysis completed from the innovative approach to the HVAC systems versus a conventional approach to HVAC systems? Was there a greater overall upfront cost for this direction? I think Jeff's probably best to answer that, or Ben if he's still online. And I don't know, we've done this kind of analysis for many projects, and it's, each project's a bit different, but for this one specifically, Jeff, if you have any insights.
Yeah, it's a difficult question because what is a conventional approach to HVAC that would achieve these results? So again, the goal was to find the lowest cost solution that met the target. So there was not greater upfront costing. Other projects have done a more detailed analysis. And in order to do a detailed analysis, you basically have to do a full schematic design of a thermal gradient header solution and then compare it to whatever the engineer who's doing the conventional approach solution would be. So there's a lot of advantages to the thermal gradient header. We cascade flows, we use lower flow, resulting in smaller pipes. the whole system optimizes the performance of chillers, so we get not only more efficient performance out of the chillers, but we get more capacity out of the chillers, which helps for climate resiliencies. So there's a lot of positives to the technology that don't happen in the conventional system.
And Jeff, my experience having been part of some of those cost analysis is that generally it has shown to be either a cost savings for the same performance or a better performance for the same cost, something along those lines. Great. Okay, next question from Hannah. Do you know if Holy Family has or had a summer peak or a winter peak for BC for like hydroelectricity? I understand hydro peaks in the winter overall, but I expect cooling will be a larger demand for our sites. In that scenario, solar would be a double win, peak demand savings and kilowatt hour usage savings. Great question, Hannah. Mark, do you want to add anything to that? Or Ben or others?
Yeah, Mark, you might know better actually having looked at the PV, but I would have expected originally a summer peak, although only slight maybe because there wasn't that much cooling on the site, but I would expect we'd still see a bit of a bump from cooling in the summer.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what that would be the answer.
I think for sure
So
now you have a bit more. Although interestingly, yeah, I wonder, Jeff, have you seen now over the year if there's more of a bump in winter versus summer? Because we're running the chillers all year long. So I don't know when they run harder.
Yeah, they're going to run harder in winter because we're using glycol to make very cold fluid to collect more thermal energy from the available sources. We're even using the dry cooler to collect thermal energy from the outdoor air. So when it gets to, 3-4 degrees Celsius outside, we're sending it, -1 degree Celsius glycol and still collecting heat from the outdoor air. It's almost like you're turning the heat reclaim chiller into an air source heat pump at that point. They're not super efficient, but they're more efficient than straight electric heat. And the electric boilers are going to be tapping out when we get really cold outside. So definitely the peak is going to be winter.
Great. All right, next question from Ashley. Was there any additional upfront cost to source the equipment? Example, boilers, chillers selected. Was a cost benefit analysis completed? And if there was an upfront cost, was it a payback? So I think we've to a large extent answered this, but anything you want to add, Ben or Jeff, to that specific question about equipment costs?
The equipment itself is like I was saying earlier in the presentation, fairly standard equipment. So there wasn't, other than the TGH, everything else was, more off the shelf. There were various options available. So we did evaluate between different types of chillers for their performance and cost. For example, boilers likewise. So yeah, I would say those componentry were all fairly standard. The only special thing I recall we had to do was those exhaust air handlers on the roof. Because of weight restriction issues, we actually made those out of aluminum rather than standard kind of more steel construction. So they added a premium, but that saved on the structural reinforcing side. So actually it was probably less expensive to do it that way in the end.
Yeah, and the fact that the equipment is used for dual purpose, like we have a dry cooler to reject heat, it would have been double the size if we weren't also rejecting heat to the exhaust. So when you buy exhaust coils and you use them for both, it's a very cost-effective way of rejecting and collecting energy. So it's almost like you don't buy the fluid cooler that pays for your exhaust system that you then use as both reclaim and rejection. So there's a pretty big capital cost bump that way that easily pays for the fees that we would charge for our technology.
Great. Next question from Andrew. Would the project have been funded / implemented in full scope if there were not incentives or rebates applied to these projects? It's a good question. I think it's hard to say, but I think knowing Tony's drive to achieve these significant targets, it may have just taken longer because the incentives really just increased the amount of capital that we had in a given year, or maybe not capital, but dollars. And so without those, I think he would have just, had to spread those phases out further. That's kind of my guess as to what would have happened. Anyone else want to add to that?
I think a lot of it also has to do with the amount of funding that Providence Healthcare gets. compared to other health authorities like Vancouver Coastal Health, Fraser Health, we're substantially less than the other health authorities. So we have less money to spread across all of our sites. So that I think is also a contributing factor where we had to wait until the following funding year to do the second phase of the windows.
Yeah, which in a way speaks even more to the success of the project in terms of the team, Providence in whole has been very nimble, very good at using their internal resources like yourselves really effectively, and really sharpening the pencil on every single dollar spent. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say that sort of restraint of really limited funding has driven a degree of creativity and excellence that's pretty impressive.
That's pretty spot on, actually, Alex.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Providence is definitely unique. Each health authority is unique, and that's one of the great things that stands out. Okay, another question: is there a potential for full electrification, and what would be the challenge? What do you use for the modeling of the Thermonix system? Okay, so there's two questions there. In terms of full electrification, I'm not sure who should speak to that best, but I mean, certainly it would be entirely possible, and I think has maybe already happened at some of the sites. So yeah, if anyone else wants to speak to that, and then the modeling we've used for Thermonix, I think there's a few answers to both of those.
Yeah, full electrification at peak winter is really when you're going to have to commit, or the grid is going to have to commit a certain capacity to the facility at that moment in time. And every building with the current technologies can't go to full electrification. So as soon as one goes to full electrification, that takes out grid space for somebody else doing potentially even their first project if there's no power left, because they, hydro can't commit it to that site if it's already committed to another site. So I think the biggest challenge for full electrification is the amount of electricity in the province. And for modeling, and Ben can talk this, but I'm pretty sure it was not a modeling software. It was just a spreadsheet that Kenny put together.
Yeah, that's correct. We do a bunch of like regression analysis and other types of analysis, but ultimately comes down to getting a really good understanding of the system and how it's operating, and then creating a model in an Excel spreadsheet to simulate that. We find with these existing systems, oftentimes you can boil down the complexity to a few variables that you can model, and then you can readily test those and manipulate them a lot more easily within an Excel spreadsheet. There are other softwares out there you can use for it, and we sometimes do apply them, but in this case, we just used an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, and I'll just build upon that a little bit. Having been an energy modeler in the past, although my knowledge is a little bit outdated, I know that there's always many ways to model a system, and tools like IS virtual environment, where you can build the mechanical system literally control valve by control valve, would enable like the full complexity to get implemented explicitly and directly into a model. That's costly, of course. So other strategies like having a whole building model that captures like an hourly analysis of where the heating is needed and where it's going, taking into account the envelope, mechanical systems, the internal gains, all of that. And then extracting that into Excel, and then you have this hourly summary of where the heating and cooling are needed and where they're going, and then some sort of post-processing using Excel is often the best way to really know exactly what changes you're making and be able to test them against real data. So long story short, lots of ways to do it, and we've seen many different people do it differently, and many ways to get a pretty accurate result. Okay. Last question that is here for now is from Mo, and maybe it's more of a comment, I'm not sure. The installation value of Vancouver is 1,075, and compared to Calgary, which is 1,200, this gives a good 12 months of solar energy yield. So thanks, Mo. So Mo was involved in the PV installation. Obviously, he's expert there. So hopefully that adds a bit of clarity to that question. And with no further questions, we've already gone well over time, but hopefully folks are enjoying this recording after the fact. Maybe one last thing I can share. I did a quick tabulation of the based on what Ben shared, the before data from 2019 and the after data being the past 12 months, I just summarized a quick energy use intensity and GHG intensity, because I think those numbers are sort of sometimes easier for people to digest and compare to their own facilities. So this may need to be double checked, but my understanding here is that the before, so the energy use intensity was electricity was about 136, gas was about 244, with a total of, you know, close to 400. And then after, obviously the electricity went up because there wasn't full cooling before, and you're using more electricity to deliver some of that. But gas gone down to 24. So you know, about a 25% reduction in total energy use intensity, with, you know, the amount of that's coming from gas significantly reduced. And then in terms of carbon, so the before, about 46 kilograms of carbon dioxide per meter squared per year of gas, and about 2 of electricity, so, you know, 49 or so, close to 50 in total, going down to 5 kilograms of CO2 per meter squared of gas and 4 of electricity, so close to, I think it's under 9. So that's where you get that really significant savings on carbon. So yeah, 82% carbon reduction based on that data, 2019 to the past 12 months. And I know that Providence is in the process of issuing one of their annual reports. So it doesn't usually go down to the building level, but you'll see these projects reflected in Providence's most recent climate change accountability report, which will be probably posted publicly in late June. So I will stop talking, and thanks everyone again for joining. And we do hope to follow up with a case study eventually about this these projects, so that you can delve more into the nitty-gritty. Thanks again. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Alex.
Mhm.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.